Good morning, evening, afternoon, happy time zone. I am so excited to share this day with you because today the Underground Game QA podcast is bringing you something fresh and new. Welcome to the Underground QA podcast, a podcast about quality assurance in the video game industry. My name is Chelsea Curran Adams, and my pronouns are she, her. I have two fellow QA professionals and one guest star therapist with us today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Diarmaid, but most people call me Water, and my pronouns are data.
And my name is Marcin, and my pronouns are he, him.
My name is Ashley, and my pronouns are she, her.
Today's disclaimer is that all individuals appearing on the podcast are not doing representatives of their respective companies, and the opinions expressed on here are their own. This is a special podcast on health topics, so I have more legal jargon to add for you. This is not medical advice today. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a professional or other qualified health professional with any questions you may have regarding your condition. Thank you. We love you. So today we are here to talk to you about mental health. We work in an industry with a lot of mental strain. It's a creative field with a ton of stress and pressure on the teams to not only just deliver the product, but deliver the product and then sell it and then keep it going if it is not a box product, which so many products are not. Not only that, this year is extremely hard. You have probably heard, talked to, and seen folks who are going through a very difficult year. More than 7,000 developers in our industry have been laid off across the world. So because October was Mental Health Month, we decided to invite a special guest, Ashley, to help us tackle the topic of how to take care of your own health, mental health in these tough times. So today we're going to get started with a lightning round that is important, I believe. What acts of self-care have you given yourself lately?
I can go first because I'm very excited about that. So I went back to doing hobbies and I started going back into programming. So, and I wasn't, it caught me off guard because I was like, yeah, I just want to go because of professional reasons, go back to programming. But once I started doing it, even now I'm thinking about the programs I want to go and write to. So I'm very excited about that. So it makes me going. So I'll constantly, when I'm at work and I'm like, okay, where's the clock ending? Because I want to go back and do some programming in C++. It makes me really happy.
Wow, that's a very nerdy self-love. I dig it. I dig it. Water?
I'm really into like fragrances, like candles and perfumes and stuff. So I probably allowed myself to spend a little too much money on like candles and perfumes and so on. Like one of my favorite things to do is to go for a little walk, and then when I come back, just light a really nice scented candle and kind of chill out and play some games for the evening. So I think that's probably the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay, what's your favorite scent?
Neroli, without a doubt. It is a very nice scent, and I would highly recommend anyone to get some neroli candles.
Yeah. Water just introduced me to the smell of neroli last week by like making me smell it. We had talked about it, and it smells so good. How would you describe it?
I think it's kind of like herbal, but it's like you can sort of get some citrus off of it, so it's kind of a mixture of herbal and very citrusy.
Ashley, I bet you didn't know that you were joining a spa and scent and programming oriented podcast today. Why don't you tell us about what acts of self-care you've done for yourself lately?
I'm here for it though. I had dinner with 3 different friends this past week, which is like 6 months worth of dinner with friends. So it was fantastic. I'm here for good food and friends.
That's a motto for life right there. Good food and friends. Yes. For myself, I actually said no to some plans, and I think that has been good self-care. I think I'm one of those people who always feels like they're missing out if they don't say yes to something. And so I told my FOMO to FOMO and said no to something. So that's hard, but I think good self-care. So to get today kicked off, Ashley, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and just kind of give us an idea of who we're talking to today so that our audience can get to know. And for folks who are watching live, please feel free to chime in on Twitch chat. We're actively watching it, and we would love to hear and see what you're going through while we're on. Also, ask questions at any point in time, and we'll do our best to get to them.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of North Carolina. I'm also a perinatal mental health therapist, which means I specialize in working with pregnant and postpartum moms. I have been in the field for...
No, we lost Ashley. The dog interfered.
Apona.
You got a visitor. I currently own a private practice and work with adults in transitions, parenthood, and help with mood and anxiety disorders.
Amazing. We lost you for just a minute there. So hopefully we got to see things, but I think, how many years have you been doing this? I think that was the part that we missed out on.
12 years. I've been in the field 12 years.
Okay, great. We are super duper excited to talk to you today, and thank you so much for being with us. All right, so tell us what exactly you do. You said some things there. You are helping pregnant folks. You're helping folks who are on their parents' journey. You're also, a specialist in therapy in general. That's at least what you went to school with. So tell us, what do therapists do? How do they help? And, feel free to describe whatever you'd like to.
Yeah, so therapists just generally offer a safe, non-judgmental space to help people process their emotions, help learn more about the connection between our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors. They help identify behavior patterns, help us learn more about ourselves and our past. They help identify and develop skills to better cope with stress, learn how our stressors impact our relationships, and just help us better interact in our daily lives. Really, what therapy is going to look like for you is just going to greatly vary depending on your specific needs, kind of what's bringing you to therapy, and also the therapist that you see based on their background, their licensure, their experience, and the therapy modality that they're bringing to the table. So a lot's going to kind of depend on what is bringing you to therapy, and then the kind of therapist that you see specifically.
So you're telling me that there is different types of therapy, and it's not just the lay down on a couch and sad or deal with traumas constantly. Like, therapy can be a different experience based off of what you need.
Yeah, so there's different licensures. I can speak with, specifically, like, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Here, I know in the States, even varied state by state, it's going to kind of be named something different. Here in North Carolina, you're going to find like a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist. We can all really do relatively the same thing. Our background, our education is just going to vary differently. And then kind of like you would go see a specialist in the medical field, like an orthopedist. We can have specialized training beyond that. Like, I'm a perinatal mental health certified therapist. You can have licensed clinical addiction specialist. You can have play therapists, work with children. So really who you go see might really vary depending on who you need, or, a family therapist or a couples therapist. And then kind of therapy modalities as well.
When you say therapy modality, can you give us just a super quick TLDR?
Yes. Yes. So there's a lot of evidence-based therapy treatments. We talk a lot about, when I was talking about the connection between our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors, we talk about that in cognitive behavior therapy a lot. Something I specialize in is called brain spotting, and that's something that's really helpful for trauma. EMDR is another evidence-based modality that a lot of people might be familiar with. And so really it's just kind of based on what you're needing some help with. Somatic experiencing, internal family systems might also be things that you're finding therapists that are trained in or have credentials in or certifications in as well.
Wow, there is so much for us to research on this. So I'm really excited to get to know more about this today. And let's dive in. So
Chelsea, before we dive in, because I need to ask that question, because I always heard about doctors being the worst patients. Is it the same for therapists? When a therapist goes to a therapy, is he the best or the worst patient to have?
So I will say, I can't speak for all therapists, but I will say a lot of therapists have their own therapists. So, I think we find a lot of value in what we do. And so a lot of therapists, I think just because of the nature of what we do, we find it to be meaningful and valuable and helpful. And it can, have its own challenges. And so I know a lot of us have our own therapists to help process what we're doing in our work life, and then also what's happening in our personal lives as well. So we try to practice what we preach. Not always easy, but we try.
Yeah.
it's very similar in games. I think a lot of us don't necessarily think about that, but we don't always play our own game, but we usually seek out other games at least to play for those of us who are in the industry. So very similar in that way. Are we good to move forward? We're good? Okay, let's do it. So let's dive in. Why is active care for mental health important, Ashley?
Yeah. So I think, mental health is our health. It is a component of our health. And so really trying to see mental health as not just a component of our health, and really trying to see our health in more of a holistic way, and seeing how changes impact one another, and not seeing these kind of as a box in ourselves. So, changes in our physical health impact our mental health. And when we can do sleep, improve our nutrition, address chronic pain, address health concerns, we usually see improvements in our mental health when we do those things. And the less attention we're able to give to emotional health and our feelings, we're going to see impact in our physical health as well. So it's really bi-directional. And so, like most other things in our life too, giving our mental health, our emotional health, it does require a level of attention and practice and time. And so, just wanting to do something about an aspect of my physical health, if that's, if I have a broken arm, just wanting to do something about it might not be enough. I have to have an awareness of it, that, there's something wrong first. And I have to, have the acknowledgement it needs some help, and then take, a few small active steps to put my arm on a path towards healing before I can expect something to change. So like any other aspect of our health, it just takes attention and time and some practice.
That's why when I was forming that question in the notes, I specifically put the word active, because as you said, like with the broken arm or whatever, like usually for any physical thing, it's always a feedback mechanism from your body. You broken your arm, it pains, so you know, I mean, you thought and you know automatically that pain is bad, therefore you do something about it.
Yeah.
With brains and mental health, is a little bit tricky. Like, when do you, like, I mean, aside from probably some very obvious things, you know, it's very subtle. Like, it's not something you basically wake up and you're like, okay, I'm mentally ill, I would just go and see a doctor, right? Like, it's something that it's very subtle. That's why I thought active is a good word to describe it, because you cannot just rely on noticing yourself if something is wrong, or usually when you notice it, it's basically too late.
Yeah. So it does take some practice, and I think you know, we might get into this a little bit later. We might talk about this a little bit later, but yeah, you know, I think our society doesn't do us a great service in teaching us to be patient with things taking time, especially in the mental health field, whether that's from a medication aspect or just practicing coping skills. We are often want really immediate results and want things to work the first time we try them, which is understandable when we're not feeling well, that we want things to happen quickly. And it just doesn't always work that way, unfortunately.
Who would have thought? And mental health are the same and related. Like, it's quite impressive thinking about it that way. I don't know if it's generational for us, but I know that I was not brought up to think that necessarily. Do you find that folks of a specific age have that happen occasionally, or are there generations who are more disconnected from that statement of, you know, mental health is health?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, recently we're hearing a lot more about mental health, and we're trying to really break down stigma about receiving treatment about it. I mean, I think you guys even just bringing this to this space here to talk about it is fantastic, because I think there's been a big disconnect about even receiving education about it, receiving information, receiving treatment, taking medications for it. And so historically, there's been a lack around it. You know, we don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk about, you know, that's not discussed in families. And so for a lot of people, this is the first time they're talking about their feelings with somebody, period, or they're acknowledging that, you know, they're trying to break family patterns. So I think our generation is definitely trying to do things differently.
That's great.
And especially,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that I love when you said it's bi-directional, that, you know, you go, you know, all those physical, like you sleep, you relax, all that stuff, but it also has the reverse effect. And I wanted to chime in because I'm the living example. Like, all this gray hair is because of stress. Like, I have now for 5 years issues with my stomach because of stress. Like, the stress has so much influence on my physical health. It's super important to take care of your health. You won't even notice, like, you know, I look at my photos with my when I met my wife like 5 years ago. I was so much more ginger. like now I'm slowly going white everywhere.
Yeah.
Aren't we all? Welcome to the game industry. So I think what I want to know, and this is going to be like the most broad question ever, how can you take care of your mental health?
Yeah. So it's going to look different for everybody. I think starting off, you know, really generally, it's going to take a lot of different forms. So I think really just like normalizing that for ourselves and trying to take away comparisons. So what is working for somebody else is okay if that doesn't work for you, or what used to work for you or you used to find helpful, if that's not feeling as helpful anymore, that's also okay. I think self-care can be a really buzzy, trendy word right now. And a lot of people roll their eyes at me when I ask, what are you doing to take care of yourself? What have you done for yourself recently? You know, I hear a lot, I don't have time for that. Or if I even did have time for that, I don't even know what I would do, which I understand. And so I think trying to even make self-care less prescriptive and less of like one more thing we have to do and add to our plate. And sometimes even considering like the why behind it. So with your example earlier, Chelsea, like sometimes it is adding, like I'm doing more of something because we haven't done that thing in a while. And sometimes it's doing less. Like I'm setting boundaries. I'm not intentionally not doing something. And so I think a lot of it is just even considering it from a decision-making place, a boundary place, a priority place, and less of like the behavioral place that we often think of where self-care comes from. But I do think often it can be this like really practical coping skill place as well. And when we think about coping skills, I talk a lot about like moving the needle really small, and it not being this all or nothing, black and white. Kind of how can we redefine success and what's working for us? And so, if we try something and it doesn't feel like it's working the first time, doesn't mean it's not going to work again. And if it's just working a little bit, that might still mean it's successful. And so kind of what you were talking about earlier too, like with sleep, thinking about some of these things just as like the basics of our house, kind of the foundation, when some of these kind of really core physical parts of ourselves get off track, they can really throw us for a loop, I think, more than we give credit for. We are creatures of habit more than we realize. And so things like our sleep, our nutrition, our water intake, our schedule, travel, things like that really, impact us if we've been sick recently, if we are taking our medications, if we are spending time outside or moving our body, or if we're spending time with, in relationships. I think even just giving some reflection on like, have any of those things changed recently, and kind of going back to some of those basics. Yeah.
Can you because like with physical health, I think you can go like overboard, like with doing like, I don't know, supplementation. Can you do too much self-care, even though it sounds a little bit funny, but can you just go too much, like to give you an example, like I feel better if I eat something good, and then I will just build that habit that whenever I'm stressed, even the slightest, I will just develop that habit and overeat, and then it obviously can spiral out. So can you is it that effect of me being like too self-care, or is something else?
What I usually talk about, and I talking about all these things, kind of like the foundation of our house, and get.
Uh-oh.
Hopefully it will happen again. She will just catch up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, you're back.
Okay. For any of these things, I think it's being really mindful that you don't have to overhaul things all at once. And if we think about it like that, we're probably going to get overwhelmed and shut down and not do anything. And so if you feel motivated.
Uh-oh.
I think the internet needs some self-help right now.
I'm really excited to hear if we feel motivated about. Oh, you're back.
Okay. Yeah. So I think if we feel motivated to do a couple of these things, it's okay to engage and try a few of them. Like if our sleep is off or our nutrition is off. But, if we overhaul too many things at once, we're probably going to get overwhelmed and kind of shut down. And so as opposed to just picking one or two of them and trying them and not feeling like we have to make all of these changes all at the same time, we're probably going to get overwhelmed and then not do anything.
Can you give us some ideas of what maybe some things we could do to to start that journey to take care would be? Just a couple of examples. Uh-oh,
Can
did
you
you
repeat
hear
that
us?
one more time, Kelsey?
Sure, no worries. Can you give us some examples of, some things that we could do and maybe some different types of categories to kind of help ourselves and maybe take better care of ourselves without even having to start stepping foot in a therapist's office, but also, in conjunction with care?
Yeah, definitely. So again, I think sleep, even just creating a few small routines around sleep. Sleep is often the number one factor impacting not only your physical health, but your mental health. And so sometimes that's even just creating some kind of routine around sleep, trying to go to bed at the same time or getting up at the same time. Um, like we do with babies, we do, often like a little wind down routine for kids, and we put a lot of emphasis on little babies going to sleep and doing a little routine for them. We forget about that for ourselves the older we get, and so doing some kind of routine to help yourself go to sleep. um, Doing some kind of time outside, and even when we're at work, that doesn't have to look like a really big thing. It can even mean 5 minutes outside. Oftentimes I encourage people to set a timer on their phone once an hour, put a sticky note on their computer, take a break. Things like pausing in the doorway of their office to take 3 big breaths. Things are really, really fast paced. And I know even for myself, the idea of like, I don't have time for a break. Things are too fast. I have too much to do. I get that. But I think we can find time to take 3 breaths in a doorway, or we can find time to go outside for 3 minutes and take 3 breaths, looking at the sun, putting our face in the sun. And so even just really trying to find a couple of minutes to slow down in the day, using our breath as a good way to kind of regulate that. Finding ways to move our body, not necessarily viewing that as exercise, but just more of movement. I know gratitude journaling and self-compassion has been really popular. Gratitude journaling. Oh, fantastic. You do that, Chelsea. I love it. It gained a lot of popularity during COVID. And it does not have to take a lot of time, but it can be like bullet journaling at the end of the day, some things that you are proud of, that you feel good about, that you accomplished. And again, even thinking about this around boundaries, kind of how can I set some boundaries around my time, and what feels purposeful and meaningful to me. So creating some time for other people in your life, making some time for spiritual or religious time, reflection, and having time for creative, playful selves. We need time to do things that we find fun and relaxing and comforting, and distracting as well, and somehow recharging. So whatever that might look like for you. Yeah.
That's beautiful. In there that I had never thought of. I may have to institute a couple of those. So I'm really excited to try the pause in the doorway one, because you're absolutely correct. I think with work from home, I'm stuck in this room for 8 to 12 hours a day. And if I decide to game, it may be even more in that case, right? So it's hard to not get trapped in this box. And even though I can see the sun, it doesn't mean I'm actually getting to enjoy it. I had someone at the hardware store the other day say, like, it's such a gorgeous day. And I was like, I literally had my first time outside when I was walking to my car, and then when I got out of my car to come into the store. And that's a shame, because the weather in autumn in North Carolina right now is just been gorgeous.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to this because I think someone in the chat mentioned, I'm gonna read two things really quickly. Stealthy Steve said, for me, mental health has been an issue for a number of years since I was 16. I've been in therapy and my health has dramatically been affected by my mental health, and I'm 25 now. I can only say it's a long journey, which I'm sure others will know. Only now I've had to go to the doctors for physical health due to being laid off, but got to keep pushing forward with care. Self-care is something I need to practice. And then Death by Female mentioned, I feel like the self-care movement has morphed into something that companies try to market and sell as something we need to buy, as opposed to small, mindful, daily things we can do to actually take care of ourselves. I also feel like it's something that's directed at Caucasian white-collar professionals and non-inclusive. I think those two comments are very key, and hopefully we'll get the chance to come back to both of them a little bit later. But I want to keep moving because we've had the idea of being in good physical shape. So you've mentioned this idea of movement and not necessarily exercise, but maybe exercise. So does that mean that I can be in good mental shape as well?
Yeah. So I'll use that in quotations, like good mental health, good. In the same way, I'm careful. I'm always careful to say like what's quote unquote normal. I think about this more on like a spectrum. I try to think of a lot of things on a spectrum and not say like what's quote unquote good or what's quote unquote bad. And so normalizing, like we are all going to have ups and downs. And so it would be abnormal not to have a reaction or not to have emotions about something difficult like grief or loss or a work layoff or relationship distress, or even the holidays. So even things that we perceive to be positive, like vacation or the holidays, are still stressful. And so I think really challenging the expectation that we are going to feel good all the time, or that things are going to improve our mood, like coping skills or these lifestyle changes that we're trying to implement, that those things are going to improve our mood really quickly. So it kind of going back to that idea that I think our society has sometimes given us the expectation for really quick results on a lot of things. So I think just kind of being mindful of that, and giving ourselves just a lot of grace to feel and have our own experience, to have time to process and move through our experience, and try to really limit comparisons to other people, and be mindful of what we're filtering on social media or wherever we're getting information, and how that might be impacting what we think we are supposed to feel or think, or even based on what we're seeing other people think or feel. So I think with keeping kind of all of that in mind, quote unquote, good mental health is not that we don't have any stress, but it's that we feel equipped to manage it. So it's really that we have a few things in our toolbox of coping skills that we can try. Some things that I think of that are when we feel healthier, again, are just that we can identify and utilize those specific skills for ourselves, whatever those are for ourselves, that we have some resiliency to situations without constantly feeling overwhelmed, that we can feel a range of emotions without feeling constantly consumed by negative emotions. We're able to recognize our strengths, that we do have strengths and we do have positive qualities. We can maintain social engagement and relationships with other people, and we can still have fun and do things that we find enjoyable and pleasurable and meaningful for ourselves.
Oof. This one hit me hard, this whole section. So, man, the holidays are hard. And at the top of the show, before we started recording, we were talking about holiday plans. I think all of us have some form of family engagement that's going on. And so, yeah, add to the stress the normal pressures of supposed to for holidays, financial pressures, all kinds of things that are normally there, and then compound it with any situational grief or, stresses that's very real. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here because I want us to focus a little bit more on the professional setting. But folks in the chat, if there's anything specifically Ashley has talked about, because again, like I feel like that last section was very impactful, please toss questions in the chat and we'll get to them. But okay, so what is mental illness? First, huge questions. And then take that and how does that affect, or how can we encounter that in the professional setting? And so how are we melding this idea of wellness, illness, and working as a human in today's world?
Yeah. So a mental illness is a condition that affects a person's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and causes distress or significant impairment in our daily functioning. We really are looking at the impact of our symptoms and how they're having an ability to engage in our daily life activities. It's really what differentiates that from a clinical perspective, from regular adjustment to stress. So the difference between what the clinical world would consider like the more expected or normal reactions to stress versus a clinical diagnosis, again, is often looking at a set of symptoms, how long those symptoms have lasted, and how severe their impact.
Deidre is struggling. We're gonna go through it.
School.
Yeah.
We're thinking about like the intensity of those symptoms, thinking about the duration of those symptoms, and we're thinking about the frequency of those symptoms.
That's it's interesting that you are talking about this. Seems very scientific, and actually QA, we take a very scientific approach kind of to this and how we look at this. So when you're talking about intensity, duration, frequency, and you're talking about impacting your daily life, how do I know when to talk to, well, one, I may not even notice these in my daily life, but how can I talk to someone in a professional setting that you may be noticing these things going on with them? How can you do it in a compassionate way? And how can you kind of say like, hey, I noticed this at work? Or how can you kind of take that compassionate approach to maybe getting someone to realize that they may be having what we would consider a negative adjustment to stress?
Yes. So you're right. What I was talking about earlier are those distinctions are about a clinical medical diagnosis and not about when I need to see or talk to a therapist. There is never a bad time. We do not have to be quote unquote sick enough or bad enough or wait till I feel something for a certain amount of time.
I see mine every 2 weeks. I feel like it's good, right? So if I'm having a bad day or a bad week, I know that I'm going to have someone there for me, and I can incidentally call them if I need help. So I agree full-heartedly on that.
Yeah. So that idea of like intensity, duration, that is what we're talking about, what differentiates from a clinical perspective when we're talking about having a diagnosis. And that's, again, like that differentiation for us on the medical side. For anybody of this idea of like, I'm just not feeling like myself. How do I know if I need to see a therapist? There's never a bad time. If you feel like I'm not feeling, some things are feeling off, I just always want to put that disclaimer out there that there's never, we never have to wait till we feel bad enough or cross some sort of threshold to seek support. But some things, that idea of like generally not feeling like ourselves, and some other things that kind of let us know that might be a good time to seek some support, that we've lost interest in things that we normally find pleasure in. We're noticing some pretty significant changes to our sleep, whether that's sleeping more than normal, having trouble staying asleep, trouble falling asleep. We've noticed some pretty significant changes to our appetite. And that, again, that can be on kind of either end of the spectrum. I'm eating way more than normal. I'm eating way less than normal. At work, it's harder to concentrate. It's harder to focus. I'm having memory problems. Even my coworkers are making comments about, my work, or maybe my boss has made some, or I'm noticing it's taking me longer to get things done at work, or I'm, really worried or having a sense of dread, more than I ever used to before. Maybe I'm feeling irritable or even withdrawn from other people. Just those are so be worth seeking attention and talking to somebody about.
Triggered 100%. Interestingly, I think it's almost become a meme of like things I would describe as burnout, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But like, there's a very interesting distinction here that I'd like for the audience watching, so you can chime in. But so many of these things I feel like are normalized in some way, shape, or form, or commoditized, like death by female was mentioning. And so I definitely want to come back to this.
But I think it's also because of the extremes that it's always either you're healthy or you're severely
Yes.
depressed. There's nothing in between, right? Like that's why what Ashley said is like there's those subtle symptoms of higher amount of or higher level of dread than normally. Like you start more sleep, less sleep, those things. You should start asking yourself, maybe I should seek out professional help to, even if it's not, what worse can happen if you reach out? Like they will say you're completely fine. Well, the worst thing that can happen, right? But if you allow yourself to have that that notion that it's you only should seek help if it's completely when it's that help is only for severe cases, it's completely bonkers. Like whenever you see something that is start creeping out and you notice those things that Ashley said, like just seek out help. Like the best thing can happen, which is you get it will be said that the worst thing that can happen if it's not the case, you'll just get a small bill and basically said you're fine. Maybe talk to me after 3 months or whatever just to check up. But worst case scenario, you're gonna just be diagnosed and you're gonna get help, and it's super important because the longer it lasts, then the longer it takes to fix. And sometimes, like with any, like the same as with physical, right? Like sometimes you break your bone so bad that you just cannot do sport anymore in the rest of your life. And I think the same can happen with mental illnesses as well. Like it's gonna last forever, and that's not what we want to happen.
Yeah.
Death by female mentioned, I think there's also a dread of what your diagnosis might be and how you'll deal with it when you find out. And I think to give an American perspective here, there's also a worry of how you're going to pay for it because we don't have healthcare. And so medication, doctor's office visits, therapy, going to a psychiatrist, all of these things aren't necessarily free. And so that's also a challenge. Like if I just don't acknowledge the problem, it doesn't exist as well. So very real pieces
just to break
here.
that stereotype of only American system being bad, in Europe you don't feel that dread because probably the queue to specialist is 5 years, so it's just too far in. You don't have to worry about that. It's 5 years in the. I have, and it's not like I'm over exaggerating. I have again. I mentioned the stomach problems. In Poland, I wait a year to see a specialist for my stomach. It's usually that's the queue. So.
Water, is this the same case in Ireland?
Yeah, tends to be quite long waiting lists for things, especially if it's not seen as being urgent. Okay. And I definitely think it can't help as well when you might have some things going on. Maybe you're not sleeping as well and you maybe have other things and you Google those things and then it's like, oh, you actually have this very serious disease that is not true. So Like, I think professional is definitely better at helping pick apart those symptoms rather than trying to Google them and maybe getting stressed out of what you're seeing that's potentially not accurate.
Lady Hot Duck says it's always cancer when you Google it.
Google.
Don't Google. This is good advice here. Okay.
I mean,
So-
it's super cool when they tell you that the symptom might be important, but it's always list of, I have a headache. You might have not slept well last night, or you have a cancer. It's always like it's not even like that far apart. It's like 3 points down. And it's like, God damn it.
That's why you also never read the side effects on your medication, because I guarantee
yeah.
if you see it, it's gonna happen. Okay, so I want to move us more towards kind of the professional realm, and so I'm going to take an interesting kind of stance here, and then Marcin and Water, we're probably going to get a little bit more involved in the QA specific conversation here, but I want to give Ashley kind of one more big question. So we have the question is, what can managers do to support their staff mental health? But I also want to take this into account of like, managers aren't the only people who can do this. And so how can I be a good coworker to support mental health? And if I'm a manager, how can I be a superstar at taking care of my staff and make sure that I'm doing the right thing?
Yeah. So I think you mentioned the word burnout. So I think recognizing burnout is a systemic problem. Burnout is that idea of like the emotional exhaustion, that feeling of drained emotional resources, the fatigue, the irritability, the negative attitude, feeling detached from work, from colleagues, a decreased sense of accomplishment in our work, decreased self-esteem. And, really this is this is coming from the systemic level. That comes from a high workload, a lack of control over our work. That can mean that if we're constantly fearful of being fired, that we're not rewarded or recognized, or there's a mismatch between our values and the job. I know you were talking about in this profession in particular, working in an environment where we are fearful of being fired, or we are watching our friends being fired. Just validating, like that's a really difficult environment to be in. So I think, in that realm, is there a way we can prioritize, we can delegate tasks, we can set boundaries? And I think when we work from home, that is really difficult because, the same tools that we use to work are the same tools that we're using to communicate and stay in contact with people. And so, there's often that expectation that we're available 24 hours a day as well. And so, that idea of like work-life balance is not realistic. And so sometimes that even just means more physical separation. Came out earlier, like physically removing yourself from your workspace, or physically having boundaries around your workspace, not having your workspace in your bedroom, or being able to physically leave your workspace at the end of a work day. Because I realize we can't leave our phones, or we can't always leave our computers. But I think from a manager standpoint, how are your coworkers or your employees feeling rewarded and feeling appreciated? How is mental health and emotional health feeling? Is that taken care of in the workplace? How is time off being supported? And I don't just mean, are your employees given vacation days, but when they come back from vacation, are they coming back to a tremendous workload where they don't even want to take the days off because they have so much dread as to what they're coming back to. Are people modeling taking time off where they feel supported, or is everybody just working so much that they feel like kind of the outcast if they're the only one that ever takes time off? So we really kind of have to think about, how are we, if we are the manager, how are we modeling these things to our employees? You know, even rest, how is rest encouraged and supported? Do we support that, or do we only find kind of value in productivity? Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the chain to the phone sort of idea and working 24/7. And, you know, as we have more remote folks or people spreading across the world, time zones can be a real thing to juggle. You know, taking time off can be really difficult. Companies have moved towards an unlimited PTO situation. All of these things, I think, are really quite difficult. And I appreciate you giving us a few questions to ask. And I think the idea of productivity and value are very, very interesting and difficult questions, because there's a personal validation aspect of things. I myself feel value in what I do. And then there's the second piece of that, which is the company expresses that value to me in one of my love languages. And so for some folks, that's I do work, I get money. For some folks, that's I do work, I get praise for the work that I do. You know, there's the physical togetherness that some people really value. There's the idea of feeling special or unique in a situation, some of that swag stuff that really can help with that. There's the idea that you get time off, that people validate with giving you that time, or that folks are actively looking to help you and do that, the idea of community and team together. So I appreciate you going into depth on that. And I think, so Water and Marcin, when we think about this, like, there is a misconception that QA are responsible for the quality of the game, and we get blamed when things go south. I can mention a million titles. We've all seen them. In fact, our bug of the cast kind of memes on this in a way, right? Like, finds the defects or is responsible or accountable for the defect database doesn't mean we're responsible or accountable for getting it prioritized and fixed, right? Those are the two pieces of that. So how do y'all cope with this? What do you do to make sure that you're not thinking that you're a piece of crap all day because you didn't, you know, the defect that you found got put in the build, or, you know, players are furious about it? What are you doing to show that you're still valued?
For me personally, to cope with the idea of being blamed for all the bugs, is just embrace the fact that I'm being blamed for it. Like I have.
Give us your secret here. What does this mean?
I mean, probably just because of my personal preference of being challenged. I just, I love to do the opposite. So if somebody challenges me, I will just find the energy to combat that. So again, like, I think what Ashley constantly mentions, find what works for you. I don't think that my recipe is the best, especially when I told my management that I have when Twitter deck still existed, I had a special column for mentioning Ubisoft Connect, and only, like, 1 out of 25 was positive. Everybody was like, why I have to, because Steam is always, why should I use anything else than Steam? So obviously every other launcher gets, I think, when you still worked at Epic, I think it was the same thing, right? Like, why should I install Epic? Why should I just buy the game on Steam? And the answer is simple. Steam takes 30% of the cut. So that's why you have to install Ubisoft Connect. Thank you. But I think, you have to just accept that that's the reality. Like, like with brushing teeth or anything else. Like, it sounds very trivial and simple. Even it's very hard to do, but bugs will happen. Witch hunt will happen. That's completely normal, and I think accepting that's the normal state of software and game development and software development, that bugs will happen, things will happen, like bugs, critical issues, blockers, or whatever. It's never going to be smooth. And just I always say that phrase that my popcorn is always ready for the drama. embracing the fact that you welcome that chaos, because then you have the most impact, right? Like, I'm very motivated by being able to step in and help the team combat the chaos that is happening and help them, right? So just make sure you embrace that those things are happening, and then tell yourself, okay, it's a team spirit. And I think one of the things that, for example, as management, we covered in, for example, right now with the release that is happening, as because there's a mentioning by opinions didn't matter by the Darkest Night. We created a process where the product owner and production have to accept the test suites that are going in, and then we together also do the go and no go process. So everybody has to, like, there are parts of every department that says go or no go. So if anything explodes, it's no longer QA to being blamed at, it's no longer production to be blamed at, it's no longer engineers, because we all made a decision. It's a team game. We all accepted all the plans and everything that we're doing. So if something happens, everybody has now the defensive line. Look, maybe I am to blame, but you have accepted my plan. So figure out those processes and pipelines where you can deflect, and also again accept, like, everything that we create as human beings is not perfect. Like, there will be mistakes. So just embrace the fact that we'll make a mistake. Like,
Yeah.
I think I even last time we had an episode, we had that, like, you have to have Bob Ross mentality. There's no mistakes. There are only happy accidents.
I love it. Love some Bob Ross. I like that. I like, you mentioned that it's kind of deferring, but I actually think it's good partnership. What you're stating is, like, you have good partnership with your production. It sounds like you've had the conversation at least to say, like, hey, you're partners with us in this, and your understanding of what's going on, the defect side of things. So I like that perspective. Water, what do you think?
I think there's only so much we can do over this perception as well. So, like, there's things that I've done in the past of kind of like surround myself by folks who understand this conception maybe a little better than the widespread misconception that QA is entirely responsible for quality. So surrounding yourselves with others that you work with, surrounding yourself by folks in the Discord and stuff who also get a lot of this. And being able to have those discussions and being able to talk to other people, I think that can be really helpful. Like, another thing that is, like, in your control, that you're not going to be able to necessarily chip away at this entire iceberg misconception at yourself, but like give you some feeling of control, is being able to educate and advocate for both yourself and for what QA does more widely. So being able to talk to that, being able to clearly and concisely explain what QA does and what QA is actually responsible for, and how quality is a studio and more than just QA responsibility. That can be really helpful also.
Yeah, I think y'all have heard this a few times, but quality doesn't equal quality assurance, and quality assurance doesn't equal testing. And I think that understanding those three things is very integral for this. So, like, quality is everyone's responsibility, and everyone is accountable, just like Water. Both you and Marcin have both said that. And I think that it's easier said than done in some cases where you don't feel like you have an advocate. And so, I think we've mentioned getting in the community, talking in Discord. It's good to get the negative feelings out and just, to say, hey, I feel this way. But then the next step is to bring something to the table that means that your team can't ignore you anymore, or to find a new job, if I'm honest, or find a culture or a setting or a team that is willing to work with you. You don't even necessarily have to change jobs to find folks who are more willing to work with you. You just may need to readjust who you're talking with, because Ashley, I'm sure you can speak to this in some scientific way, but the folks you surround yourself are such a key part of how you interact with the world. And surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals who value the same things that you do, and have a more optimistic perspective on life, can be so important to feeling that value.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about two more things, which is toxic culture. And I think that, we deal with those on a pretty regular basis in terms of the media surrounding games industry QA, everything from really inappropriate events in the past to discrimination, the way that folks are represented in games, all the way through to representation in the working staff of games. And so something I hear or heard a lot that I've tried to put a stop to is the idea of we are a family. When someone says we are a family, that instantly makes my skin crawl. Talk to me, Marcin, Water, and Ashley, if you'd like to give some input. But the phrase "we're a family" feels real gross when we talk about work. Do y'all have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I kind of similarly get that like skin crawling sensation. I think that it's almost used as a way to like when you are family with someone, you're willing to go the extra mile and you're willing to do things that you wouldn't necessarily be willing to do for friends and be willing to do for other people. So kind of trying to create that conception that your studio or that your discipline is a family is a way to get more out of you than is fair to ask of. And similarly, not a big fan of that either. So when possible, potentially try and push back on that.
And also creates that notion which I really hate, which is that cult like of you cannot say bad things about your family. Like just, especially publicly,
yeah, I think
so.
that idea of like coming from a values place and like how can we be in the system but not of the system, when we have maybe a values disalignment, is probably where that.
Yeah. I think that idea of values is really key. And Marcin, do you want to expand on that too?
Yeah, like it's you have those in companies. You have that pressure of having those key values as a company, and usually this is where they will do that because it's
Yes,
and I think it came from a yeah
in value statements from companies before,
which I think it comes from a good place, but unfortunately how capitalism and corporations work, that gets twisted, right? Because when you, especially for example, if you come from conservative background or religious background, like family means very positive things. So it is that temptation to just find a very short way to say what you want out of the values of the company, to just put it family because it says so many things. But unfortunately, I think we have the same battles when corporations twist a lot of positions inside the companies when you have HR is not your friend, right? Because even it was sold by corporations, even though it's a back office team that is very helpful to you, it was sold by corporations that this is the person that cares for you, but it was used as a backstabbing mechanism, especially in America, for being like they would treat you. I'm putting out my America because again, this is the same conception. Like
it's
with
okay,
the
Marcin. All of us believe it. You're fine.
In Europe, it looks a little bit different, but again, I get the same notion that it always builds that extreme dichotomy of either HR is here to defend you with their life, or they are your sole enemy. And I think that happens again with those values like family and other things. Like it always comes to an extreme. It's never like we build trust and then it's put as a value. But unfortunately, again, depending on the corporation and the company working on, every can be twisted. So even though there are values in those companies, notice how they're being phrased and how being used, because any value that is in the company can be twisted to unfortunately abuse it, because they will, again, going back to that cult-like thing of but we value trust. Like we had this episode about Watermelon Mania Entertainment, right? When anything that you say is positive can be twisted to a nightmarish version of it. So never treat companies' values as given, and make sure that what they're saying matches the action that they're taking, because they may say that they're your friend, your family, whatever they say. It can be not even family. They can even be, we are not family here. They can even use that phrase for those people that are like, yeah, I hear family, I run. they can even abuse that to build a sense of safety that we're not a family, but then use that against you and then abuse it to make you work hours and all that stuff. So please pay attention. No, doesn't matter what values the company say they have, make sure that it matches, you're aligned what it means. So it's good to always have a discussion with your HR or manager or whoever is, if you're getting hired, what they mean by those values in your statements. I think most of the companies have, and I think in the episode that we did about hiring, we said that it's a good practice to look out for. So align what it means for what, even if they have family, make sure that you understand what it means family for them, what it means for you. But then keep track what it means, because what actions they take in terms of those values. Because if they say they have values but they do opposite, then then you can run.
It's one of those things. I just talked with my team about this recently. Like, I take it from the sports team mentality. Like, I would much rather us be a sports team than be a family. And that's because sports teams are always trying to win and get better. Whereas your screwed up family, Uncle Jim Bob is a weirdo over there, and we just put up with his crazy antics on Thanksgiving because that's what we do. And Auntie Millie May is, she's known to get to have a little bit too much to drink, but we put up with that too because that's who she is and she's had a hard life. And like, there's so much of that we put up with from family, bad behavior. Like, we put up with those things, and family doesn't necessarily try to make you better. Maybe the closest members to you do, or whatever the situation is, but family always makes me cringy. Whereas if I think about things, and Marcin, like you said, not every family is the same and not everybody has the same connotations. And so really breaking into that is really key. But the idea of you want to be with people who want to make you better, whatever the terminology is for that, sports team, family, whatever it is, and make sure that aligns with your personal values. I think that's really
in order
key.
to dismantle those, I think the most healthiest approach you can get is just to basically say, in the end, you're a hired professional to do a set amount of work for a set amount of time for a set amount of money. You're not here to make friends. You're not here to feel good about it. Obviously, it's awesome if I can have friends and all that stuff.
Cake.
Yeah, awesome. But at the end of the day, it's not. You shouldn't equate your self of worth for people liking you at your job, agreeing you in the job, because what you should be doing is what is on paper, the contract that you signed. You're here to, if you're a QA, you're here to report bugs, point risks out, all that stuff. You're not responsible for the whole company, for the whole product, because even like you said, Chelsea, the mentality of the sports people, even sports team mentality, we're here to do win, crunch 20 hours, just for the win, right? So in the end, always have that healthy framework of being like, doesn't matter if you're a team or whatever. In the end, it's a company. You're a worker. You're being contracted, and that's the healthy way to approach it. Like, especially if you start feeling bad. Like at the end, have that mantra in your mind. Remember, you're being hired, you're being paid, done.
Yes, the company doesn't care about you. I know that that's a really nasty phrase to say too, but like ultimately, your company probably doesn't care about you. They do care about making money, staying in business. And while someone who works at the company may truly care about you, including your manager, the folks who are sitting next to you, and it may even be the CEO, one day that person may not be there and they may not be there to care for you anymore. And you will need to figure out other reasons that validate your existence inside of that company. And so when you start to think about companies caring about you as an individual, you better own that company, because otherwise, even situations with your best friends can go poorly when motivated by money, time, stress, all the things. So I want to keep moving. We have a couple more questions that I want to get to here before we end up. So layoffs have been a thing. I mentioned it. There are about 7,000 layoffs this year alone in the game industry. That's a large amount. And quite honestly, I feel like QA has probably been disproportionately affected as expected in some ways. And when we're looking at other things like external groups, which are having layoffs, but also just ending contracts, right? We have external testing groups, which are ending contracts, which don't count into those numbers because of funding being reduced. We have all of the other situations where Folks aren't necessarily being accounted for in the quality industry, but they are a massive part of this. Ashley, how can we navigate the mental health impact of being laid off? How do we not just spiral out of control from here?
Yeah. So I think kind of in line with what we've been talking about, like allowing space for our emotions and seeking support from a professional. Keeping, if we have been laid off and maybe we're in a process of applying for a job, keeping to routine, keeping to a structure, doing some things outside of just job hunting, things in relationships, things, some other things to keep us, keep our mind distracted away from just the idea of resume writing and interviewing. So finding some purpose and meaning in our day, and creating some small manageable goals, and just kind of focusing on one thing at a time. And identifying those things that are within our control. There are a lot of things out of our control. Job market right now and financial insecurities. But what are the things that are in our control, like the quality of our resume or our interview, the application, the effort that you are putting in, and not focusing so much on those things that feel or are out of our control. Maybe, like you had mentioned earlier, exploring other options. Maybe that's being out of the field for a little while, or even just part-time, even with the idea of like, this is just for now. It won't always be this way. Doing some networking, talking with some other people who either are in the field or in another field you're interested in. And I think, like you had mentioned too, not aligning our value and our worth with our work, which, our society place a lot of value on that. That's often the first thing we hear when we are meeting somebody. What's your name? What do you do for work? What's your job? And so, remembering we have a lot of worth and a lot of value outside of what we do for work. And so that might be working with a therapist to help you identify your values, and then creating some space to develop some goals around how am I implementing these values in my life outside of work, and where am I, where in my own life are my values being fulfilled, or where are these misaligned? But getting away from finding all of our meaning, all of our purpose, all of our worth at work.
So key. Water, Marcin, anything to add? The mass layoff stress.
I've seen so many, and again, I just want to preface so those people that get angry with me. I'm not saying that you should stop what you're doing, but I've seen so many people saying, for example, they're looking for a year or two now to land a job in the industry after being laid off, and they haven't found a spot anywhere. And I think what Ashley said is key. Like, maybe just change the industry. It's obviously a different industry, but still similar-ish. It's either going into either movie industry or software industry or whatever. Maybe just change the industry with preserving the skill set that you're working with. But there's nothing wrong in switching and now being a clerk at a shop or whatever, right? Like, just to regain that sense of control and doing something, and using this as a platform to jump off back to the industry if you wanna do. Like, I sense a lot of people think that if they switch to another job outside of industry, it's like they've lost. Like, it's game over, right? Like, I'm going back to those, uncool jobs or those or out of industry when I'm doing things that I don't want, maybe they moved out of being a clerics to the industry, so for them it's a loss. So it's never a loss, my friends. Like, do whatever it takes to survive in this current situation, and every job is wonderful, and just do whatever it takes to survive that hard time. And me working in before the game industry, being a shop clerk, doing folding baguettes in a bakery, whatever it was. It sucks if you lower the pay, and especially if you cannot afford that. But it's never a loss. It's never a game over. You haven't lost anything. Like you're worth everything that you think you're worth, and as a human being, and working industry doesn't define you. There are multiple other things that define you. So never give up. Just do whatever it takes to feel better and regain yourself. And then if you still want to work with us in the industry, then we will welcome you with open hands. But please don't think that being laid off or having to move out of industry is somehow a failure. It isn't.
Here. Water?
I don't know if there's anything that I could really say to anyone who has been laid off or has been looking for a job for some time. I don't think anyone could say anything to those people that would really help things massively, beyond just being available and being there for anyone who needs an ear or to vent or to be able to say things. I think one of the things that I have learned previously from times that I've been a therapist, from when I had a very negative mindset, was looking at things more fairly. And when you're laid off and you look at that from a fair perspective, it's awful. There isn't actually much positive to say about that. So you can look at something fairly and then say, this is all pretty negative. But another aspect to that is to say, you can look at it fairly and say, I am more than my job. My identity is more than that. And that kind of feeds into a lot of what Marcin was saying, is that you can be more than games QA. You can go into another industry if you felt that was helpful, and that doesn't invalidate you or your identity in any way.
Yes. I think, just to plug the community one more time, out of every episode where we try to, there have been a lot of folks who have posted open jobs, resume reviews, cover letter reviews, just random messages of the day, getting involved in conversation. I am a person who has benefited from getting a job out of the underground game QA chat. So it's there, it's possible. Keep your eyes open, keep active in that chat and channel. And, amazing things can come out of just making those networking connections, like Ashley said earlier. For our last big question today, survivorship or survivor's guilt is a very real thing. And for those of us who have not gone through the layoffs, but are seeing our friends, are seeing our companions, our family go through layoffs, how can we best support our colleagues and friends that have been laid off, Ashley? And what do we do to make sure that we don't stop experiencing joy because of feeling guilty around that?
Yeah, I think you're right. Guilt is really valid and it is really normal. Trying to hold space for kind of all of the emotions that you might be feeling on that side. That's really hard for us as humans to hold opposing emotions at the same time. So, for what that might mean for you is, feeling really joyful or relieved or thankful that you have a job yourself, and feeling, really fearful that you might lose your job, and feeling, just really sad for your friend who has lost their job, feeling really fearful for them. So trying to really hold space for all those conflicting emotions at the same time, and just normalizing that, and understand that that's really hard for us to do, to hold all of that, of those opposing things. I think allowing your friend or your colleague, whoever it is who has lost their job, to share with you kind of non-judgmentally what they're going through, and for you not to try to, place blame or try to kind of problem solve with them, or try to dissect the reasons behind it, but just kind of be there to listen. But offer them some practical support. So maybe you can help with the resume writing or the networking, or maybe that doesn't involve job hunting or networking. And maybe that's, can I bring you a meal? Do you need help with childcare while you go on an interview? Do you need me to walk your dog? Do you need me to, do you want to go to the movies? Do you want to do something that doesn't involve work? And so making sure to still include them, especially if a lot of their social network is around work, that they don't feel all of a sudden like they don't have a social network because they're not at work anymore. And so checking in on them, and that doesn't always have to be a big thing. It can just be a text. It can just be a 5-minute phone call, but making sure that you're still communicating with them and checking in with them. And yeah, I think too, managing and being really mindful of expectations around the holidays for what that might bring up for ourselves and for them. Yeah.
Yeah, the holidays is a really challenging time because there's like a financial constraint that's
Mhm.
there. So how can we kind of keep ourselves from spiraling folks or kind of rabbit holing with them, or, you know, kind of how do we keep that healthy perspective and still allow them the space to kind of vent their feelings, feel supported and validated? Because, you know, I've been in a situation very different, but when I lost my mom, there were various, you know, responses to that. Some of those were very compassionate and clearly I knew that people cared. Some felt very invalidating of my grief, and then others, you know, made me feel really bad. And so how do I keep from doing that to someone? How can I be cognizant, knowing that I'm not perfect as a human, but how do I keep from making things worse or rabbit holing with someone?
Yeah. Well, I think you're spot on with that. Sometimes people don't know the right things to say. And so being on the receiving end of that, of, you know, sometimes that does feel invalidating. And so, not withdrawing from them out of fear of, well, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm just not going to say anything at all. Because often that, and so sometimes that just means sitting with them, even if you feel like, I don't know what to say. I don't really know what to do. Just being with them as opposed to, withdrawing or ignoring them out of fear. And even acknowledging, I'm not sure exactly how to help you. What do you know? How can I help you? And asking them directly. I think for ourselves, being able to kind of separate our own thoughts and our own feelings from fact, if we're worried about this happening to ourselves, like our feelings are always valid, but sometimes our feelings, that doesn't mean that they're true. So just because I feel like something bad is going to happen doesn't mean something bad is going to happen. Or just because I think something doesn't mean that it's true. And so being able to even get a little bit of own thoughts and our own feelings for ourselves versus like what is the evidence? Do I know for myself something is happening? Can it really help, like rabbit holing from active problem solving, and really be able to problem solving and kind of that spiraling.
What
Yeah.
helped me privately with all what Ashley said is accepting that emotions are not good and bad. They are just response of your body to different situations. It's only how then you act based on those. So if sitting with a friend that is now venting awkward, that's fine. There's nothing wrong in feeling awkward. There's nothing wrong in having awkward silences. As Ashley said, just sitting with them, I think it matters. But I think also, even though it might feel awkward, like literally sometimes asking the stupid questions. Hey Chelsea, because for 5 minutes you were venting. Do you want my practical help or emotional support, right? And then if you go emotional support, you're gonna be like, yeah, fuck this company, right? Like, like ask what is the expectation of the person, because that's usually the joke with the difference between men and women, even though it's probably the same for both. Like that, sometimes women want to have emotional support, sometimes practical, and I'm confused, but I think it's the same for men. It will happen the same thing when sometimes men will lash out of you when you're providing a logical help, and they were like, I don't want your ex, like, I know what to do, right? And they get angry, right? So asking that stupid question, do you need emotional support or practical help, makes all the more difference. And depending on what answer you get, then be at it. Like if they want emotional support, then you just nod, yeah, fuck this guy, yeah, I understand, this is stupid, yeah, like conforming there, because that's what they need right now, right? Like they want
Yeah.
you to be there and not be like, oh, this is unrational, or you're now being like, this is just 101 to losing your friend, right? So
Yeah.
I just accept.
It's interesting because, that advice I think is really good for relationships, period, and for being a manager, period, of asking, what do you need right now? And I think that, Ashley, that's amazing practical advice just for literally every day. Funny enough, I have a ton of This Is Fine gear around my room, but I have This Is Fine, the meme tattooed on my leg, because it is okay. I mean, it would be awkward if I'm like, hey, look, but it's right there. I have it tattooed on myself because I feel like sometimes it is, you just like the house is burning down around you and you need to have a cup of coffee and talk to someone about it. And that's the reality. And we joke about it in QA because like it is literally a meme about our lives, but sometimes it's harder than others. And so, I'm really thankful to this community for being there for one another, and thank you for listening and approaching with kindness and love, and sometimes anger and sometimes action and activity, but always thankful for people being here. And Ashley, immensely thankful for you today for this too. I have one last big question before we move to finally wrapping up. So there's a lot of mental health toll specifically from being unable to find work for an extended amount of time. Maybe it's your partner that's also going through this, or a good friend. There's an exhaustion aspect to it, mentally, physically. There's the feeling of hopelessness. There are financial pressures. There's the holidays. All of the things that we've mentioned today, like feeling of worth, feeling of stress. You've got kids. I mean, you're very well in tune to working with parents and mothers. Tell us some resources to deal with the mental toll of what's going on, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So to these resources, I don't have any connection or association with any of these agencies, not to promote one over the other, and only kind of offering just some general information about where to seek some information. And by no means are these, is this an exhaustive list of where to seek some support, but just for some general, information, as well as a hotline, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, SAMHSA, the National Suicide and Crisis Hotline, which is 988, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, all wonderful resources, as well as a helpline. To find reliable therapists in your area, you can also search based on specialty and need, as well as filtering out by if they take insurance, psychology site. Some other places to find therapists in your area, BetterHelp and Talkspace, and those agencies in particular try to make it where you can access care through telemed, as well as they do, I believe, like some texting with your provider. And then therapyroute.com is a global directory for providers.
Those are some great resources.
Yeah. I was going to mention one more. Open Path Collective is a nonprofit that helps link people to providers for reduced fee sessions. Because I know, like you mentioned earlier, just the healthcare is often a real barrier for treatment. So, Open Path Collective.
I appreciate that. I think being able to find the right treatment is so key. And so, if you're in crisis or if you think you may have an emergency, there are tons of local suicide hotlines, and they can specialize in different things as well. There are LGBTQIA hotlines that you can talk to. There are women-specific hotlines that you can talk to. Please don't hesitate to give those a call. And like Ashley said, the U.S. National Suicide Hotline or Crisis Hotline is 988. It's a new number that changed in the past year. So call that if you think that you're having any issues as a person who has suffered from really, devastating and hopeless thoughts. Those resources can be life-saving and help you get on the path to finding what you need in a moment of crisis. So please don't be afraid to reach out. They're amazing folks. They're going to be there to help you and find what you need to find.
I also want to plug the number for European Union as well. So it's 116123. So it doesn't matter from which country in European Union and European Economic Area, that is more than just European Union. If you phone that number, so 116123, you're going to be connected to the local in the country from your phoning and a local psychological support, and then they will be able to help you and forward whatever you need. So
yes, you are not alone, and there is help out there for you no matter what. Yeah. Before we end today's cast, I would love for each of you to take a moment to shamelessly brag about yourselves so that we can find out what you love, what you're into, and how we can hear from you again if we want to. So please take a moment. Ashley, why don't you kick us off with telling us what you're up to outside of podcasting with us today and where we can find out more and just what you want to recommend us to take a look into.
Sure. I'll shamelessly plug maternal mental health. So Postpartum Support International is who I have my certification in perinatal mental health through. They also have a warm line for pregnant and postpartum moms. They have fantastic free support, online virtual support groups. So I will shamelessly plug them for anybody who's needing some support during that time in their lives. I'm obviously very passionate about that part of mental health in particular, because I think that's a underrepresented, underserved population, as are very, very many others. But that's a wonderful resource if that's something that you're needing some support with.
Is there a place where folks can find you if they want to say thank you or they can see what you're working on?
Yes. So my private practice is Willow Tree Counseling Services. I'm located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm also part of a nonprofit here in the Triad area called Postpartum Resource Center of the Triad. And you can find me on either of those websites.
We are so thankful for you today being a guest for us. Marcin, why don't you give us your plug for the cast?
Yes, I want to plug in a different community that I'm part of. So it's a community of fans of original Dungeon Keeper 1. And this month, they did a release of 1.0 version. It means that the whole project went from using the code from developers Bullfrog from 1997, and now it's completely open source and written. So they had release this month. So if you want to check it out, it's Keeper FX, or if you just Google Dungeon Keeper 1.0, you'll find resources there. So if you ever play Dungeon Keeper, or you want to see how such an awesome open source project is being loved and is given a lot of love from the fans, please check it out. It's an awesome game, and go and download it and play it.
Awesome! I've seen you plugging it in the server too. I'm excited. I got to go check it out myself. Water, what about you?
I'll plug a game as well. Recently, I heard of a game called Inkbound that is on Steam Early Access that has removed all its monetization for microtransactions and loot boxes and stuff, and hasn't replaced it with anything. So I think it deserves a bit of a shout out as something that could be worth supporting, and it's looks like quite a good game as well.
Okay, something else for me to add to my library of things that I hope I'll get to over a break but never end up getting to. I am excited for that. Today, my plug is going to be for taking a step outside of your home, whether that's indoors in a different location or outside, if that's what makes you happy. I have just spent 2 weeks out of the country. Ashley recently also just did some travel. I know, Water, you've done some travel recently as well. Folks, get outside, even if it costs you $0 just to walk outside your door. Do that. I find taking a look at whether the leaves are falling and looking at their colors, or looking at bugs or birds, or going specifically to something that makes you happy, a garden, a zoo, an electronics store, smell that plastic packaging. Get out there and see it and feel it. Put some dirt in your hands or put some plastic in your hands, whatever makes you happy. But do the thing. Get out there and experience it a little bit outside of the walls that you're trapped in most of the time. That's going to be my plug for today. So that's it for... Yes. Yeah. Well, some of us can't always sleep, even if we want to. I so wish. I just want to say that's it for us today, folks. And it was an ultra long episode, but that means that it was extra good conversation. Ashley, it seems like we're going to need to have you on again. And hopefully you will indulge us in this. I want to thank Ashley Levers so very, very much. She's one of my oldest friends on the planet. I am so glad for her help and assistance. And I'm going to have to post a picture of us from when we were 15 years old into the Discord server just to prove that we existed back then, back in the 90s and 2000s. So we also want to thank you, our audience, for listening today, wherever you were. Whether you were tuned in on the Twitch cast, on our YouTube stream, on LinkedIn, or somewhere else, or you're listening later on Spotify or wherever you consume your podcasts, we would not be doing this without you. That's a real statement. We started this as a movement 4 years ago, and one day we hope to take over the world, but instead of that, we will be waiting for that day. If you have any suggestions for future topics, this literally came out of community suggestions. All of the questions today came from you, the listener, the community activist. We put them in a doc and we went through them. We want to hear them. So whether you're in the Discord server, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, wherever you are, please get them to us. And if you're a QA professional and would like to be on the podcast, just like all of us, except for Ashley, who's an honorary QA member today, we would love to have you on the show. You can even just help volunteer. You don't even have to be on the podcast. We're looking for folks to run book clubs. We're looking for folks to help us. If you're an artist and you want to design some cool shit, just like our shirts that we've got on the cast today, or mugs, you can do that. In any case, contact us at Underground Game QA Conf. That's CONF, like conference, which we once upon a time were, but are now this lovely podcast. Underground Game QA Conf at gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter /X, whatever you call it, based off of how long you've known the platform, at Underground QA, because we love you. Not only we would love you, but we do love you, and we want to hear from you and collaborate. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Keep playing, keep testing, and keep washing yo damn hands. We love you. Now, can I cue this music? That's going to be the key. I don't know. We'll find out. It's not looking good. Okay. Until next time, friends. That's it.